I was fired during a funeral. Not after, not quietly. Right after the girl's father collapsed onto her casket, the bishop stepped onto the altar and read a letter. My name is Father Matthew Rourke, 51. I was the parish priest of St. Emilian's for 19 years. I served baptisms, marriages, overdoses, and 6 suicides. The 7th lay in the casket 3 feet from my feet. Her name was Olivia Brandt, 17, choir member, honor student. She took her life 2 nights ago behind the rectory. My rectory. Her body was found by the janitor at 6:03 a.m., still in her school uniform. The town was still pretending it hadn't happened. The funeral drew the entire city council, the archdiocese, and 2 TV cameras. They framed it as tragedy. The real word was liability. The hymn was ending when he climbed the steps. Bishop Tolland, silk robes, flanked by 2 deacons and a woman in pearls sitting in the front pew. The mayor's wife, Madeline Harris. She'd been watching me since I began the Mass. Her eyes never left the altar. She smiled when the bishop opened the envelope. "Effective immediately," the bishop said. "Father Rourke is removed from clerical duties pending financial misconduct review." No emotion, no due process, no explanation. The church went silent. No applause, no gasp, just stillness. The girl's mother sobbed into her hands. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I simply looked at Madeline Harris, still smiling, still watching. I turned to the casket and finished the blessing. "Eternal rest grant unto her, O Lord." My voice didn't shake. Then I looked up at the stained glass, Christ hanging on a tree, and said, "God sees what men hide." And I walked off the altar. There were no hands on my shoulders, no handcuffs, just silence, the kind that follows a controlled detonation. I left the vestments in the sacristy, folded neatly, placed the chalice cloth on top, picked up my old coat, my driver's license. Not a word. I walked past pews where I'd married lovers, buried veterans, baptized infants. No one stopped me. I stepped outside the cathedral doors. Rain was starting. Not enough to matter. The cameras didn't follow me, but I knew the story would. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. Blocked number. No message. I already knew who it was. In 19 years, I'd buried 342 people. That day, they buried 343. The difference was, I got up and walked out of the grave they made for me. Next phase, quiet, but not idle. Not anymore. They called it financial misconduct, but that wasn't the sin that mattered. Not to them, not to her. Madeline Harris didn't want justice. She wanted silence, and she thought she'd buried me under a scandal I didn't need to deny. I was born in this town, grew up 3 blocks from the same church where I was fired, back when it had pews without padding, incense that clung to your lungs, and priests that shouted from pulpits like fire was behind them. My father drank. My mother prayed. Neither of them buried me, but both helped me disappear. I left for war at 19. Iraq, then Afghanistan. Chaplain's aide. I never fired a weapon, but I watched too many boys die screaming in sand for God they didn't believe in. When I came home, the church was the only place that didn't ask what I'd done. They just gave me robes and silence. That was enough. Seminary wasn't grace. It was discipline. I took to it like a soldier. Latin before sunrise. Ethics before breakfast. Silence before nightfall. You learn quickly what the church wants you to see, and what it doesn't. St. Emilian's was assigned to me after Father Kerrigan died, unexpectedly. They said stroke. The janitor said overdose. No autopsy, just ashes and prayers. I took the keys the next day. The town had changed since I left. Wider sidewalks, more cameras, fewer confessions, and Madeline Harris was no longer the mayor's aide. She was his wife, and she ran the town like a queen in a borrowed kingdom. I knew the moment she turned on me. It wasn't after the girl's death. It was 3 weeks before that, when she asked me, politely, publicly, to bless a luxury development project. 10 acres of forest flattened to build a wellness retreat, owned by her cousin. They wanted the parish's endorsement to make the ground holy. I said no. The next week, a financial audit request came in from the diocese. The week after that, an anonymous call to a reporter. Claims of expense abuse. I knew what was happening. I just didn't flinch. Here's what they didn't say. I donated over $110,000 from my personal account to the women's shelter. I paid for Olivia Brandt's school uniform when her mother got laid off. I covered the funeral costs of a homeless vet last winter. I didn't expense it, I didn't ask permission, and I didn't keep receipts, but I kept records. Because I never trusted good intentions. I knew who they were, who I was dealing with. The mayor, Harold Harris, was in bed with 4 local developers. One of them sat in my pews every Sunday. Another had a key to the rectory. None of them ever confessed, but Madeline did. Once, 6 years ago. Late. Tears. Red wine breath. Her voice trembling through the screen. She told me about a mistake from 20 years ago. A man. A child. A secret. I didn't write it down, but I never forgot it. Because 3 weeks later, that child showed up at the parish door, bruised, muttering her last name. I placed her in emergency shelter housing and said nothing to anyone. I kept their secrets, all of them. The confessions of councilmen, the abortion receipt from the mayor's daughter, the therapist's notes left in the offering plate. I buried them in a file under the altar. Not to destroy them, just in case. I wasn't holy. I just knew how power worked. And now that they'd tried to crucify me in front of the town, I remembered everything. The girl in the casket didn't deserve this. Her suicide was the match. But the fire started years ago. She came to me 4 months ago. Late. Shaking. Afraid. Said someone had been following her after youth group. Said her counselor at school told her not to tell anyone. I told her to write it all down. She did. 6 pages. Names, dates, screenshots. She gave it to me in a manila envelope. I hid it in the sacristy safe. She was dead 2 weeks later. The police called it mental illness. I called it a cover-up. But I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Because there was something else. Something in the bishop's voice that Sunday. He wasn't angry. He was scared. And Madeline, she wasn't smug. She was desperate, which meant there was more to lose. Which meant I still had leverage. I didn't burn bridges. I buried them, so I could cross them again later. That week, I walked the graveyard behind the church every night. Head down, hood up. I stopped at the 3rd headstone from the left. Father Kerrigan's, the one who died of a stroke. I crouched down, unscrewed the brass plate at the base, and pulled out the flash drive duct-taped behind it. It was still dry. I walked home. Inside were 31 audio files. Confessions, conversations, meetings, none of them mine, all of them useful. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and pressed play. They thought I'd disappear, that I'd hang my collar in shame, vanish into some forgotten retreat, and pray my disgrace away. They didn't know I'd spent the last 19 years collecting sins, and now I had names, numbers, times, transactions, and signatures just waiting to be read. I didn't leave town. I didn't even leave the block. Above Sabo's butcher shop, across from the old train station, there's a studio apartment with no heat, no Wi-Fi, and no working oven. That's where I stayed. Mason Sabo owed me nothing. But when his brother died of liver failure last spring, I stayed with him through the final hours, arranged the cremation, and never sent a bill. So when I showed up after my public firing with nothing but a duffel bag and a laptop, he handed me the key without saying a word. I kept the lights off, cooked on a portable coil burner, read by window light. My only visitors were pigeons and the occasional addict mistaking my door for the clinic. The day after my dismissal, I called no one. The second day, I opened Olivia's envelope. It wasn't just a suicide note. It was a time bomb. 6 pages, printed screenshots, typed names, a handwritten list with 3 men's initials and the words choir room, Friday after Mass, and basement hall storage. The names were familiar. 2 worked in the church's volunteer group. 1 was a city councilman's nephew. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just placed the pages on the table and began cross-referencing with my old sacramental records. Then I pulled out the second envelope. The first Madeline gave me 6 years ago, sealed but unmarked. She told me to destroy it. I didn't. Inside were 5 photographs. 2 of her. 1 of a man I recognized from the governor's re-election campaign. 1 of a young girl who'd since vanished from school rolls. And the last was a scan of a signed consent form with the mayor's initials. Parental permission for relocation of a minor. Date, February 14th, 6 years ago. Everything I needed was in my memory. But now I had paper, proof, and I had time. I didn't plan vengeance. I planned accountability. But I wasn't going to ask for it. I started with the backups. In 2011, I set up a dummy Google Drive under the name John Emilian, synced it with the security cameras we had installed in the rectory and basement after a string of thefts. Nobody ever deactivated them, not even after I was removed. I logged in. The footage was still uploading. Even now, I watched a clip dated 2 months before Olivia's death. Friday, 6:47 p.m., storage hallway, Olivia, alone, crying. Then someone enters the frame. I paused it, zoomed. Recognition is instant and sickening. It was him, Deacon Ellis, Madeline's cousin. I downloaded the clip. Didn't rename it, didn't share it, just saved it. That was step 1. Step 2 was the ledger. For 5 years, I'd been skimming 7% of all parish donations into a slush account labeled Building Reserve C. The account was real. The fund was real. The money was clean. What they didn't know is that I used it to track where the rest of the money went. That wellness retreat Madeline pushed through. The one they claimed was funded by city grants. I had 5 wire transfers, all under different shell LLCs, originating from the same fund marked Easter Donation Overflow, signed off by Bishop Tolland. Step 3 was the file, stored on a burner drive. Confessions I'd been forced to transcribe when the diocese wanted behavioral profiles, post-2014 abuse guidelines. I was told to destroy them. I didn't, because I knew who might one day ask for them. By the 4th day, I had a dossier. Olivia's screenshots, Madeline's envelope, security footage, wire transfers, signed statements, confession logs, shelter intake reports, a list of names I hoped I'd never need to say. It fit into one yellow envelope. I sealed it and wrote 3 words on the front. Forgive me later. I didn't send it, not yet. That Friday, I walked to the post office. Didn't bring the envelope. Just watched the mayor's wife pull up in a black SUV. She stepped out, smiling. Handed a white package to a courier with Express Overnight scribbled across it. I followed her back to her car. She didn't see me. She never sees the poor when they're not on a bulletin. Back in the apartment, I opened a new email account. Attached no name, no trace. Subject line, you saw her cry. Now see why? Attachment, 1 image. Frame capture of Deacon Ellis. Time-stamped, dated, geotagged, no text. Just that. I sent it to 2 addresses. citydesk@eastcountygazette.com, bishoptolland@emiliandiocese.org. That night, I bought a burner phone. Texted 1 number. Blocked after delivery. You wanted silence? You'll get a sermon instead. No name, just the message. By Monday, I had no response. Tuesday, the bishop issued a no comment to a small Catholic press inquiry. Wednesday, I received a text from an unlisted number. You don't know what you're doing, M. I didn't reply, because she was wrong. I knew exactly what I was doing. By Thursday morning, the lilies were delivered to her office. No card, just the envelope, just the truth. The lilies were delivered at 8:14 a.m. White, 2 dozen, funeral style, hand-delivered by a florist from Marlene's greenhouse. The woman at the desk, Madeline's assistant, signed for them without blinking. They were marked, to M.H., with deepest reverence. Taped to the underside of the vase was a plain yellow envelope, unsealed. No name, just 3 typed words clipped from a hymnal page. He has risen. Inside were 8 photographs, 2 documents, and a USB drive. I never saw her open it. Didn't need to. I knew what was inside. Photo 1, Madeline, hotel room, mirror selfie, wedding ring off. The man in the background, choir director Thomas Lang, shirtless. The photo was 6 years old, dated, geotagged. Photo 2, City Ledger, scanned. $26,000 charitable donation routed from the parish's Easter fund to a shell nonprofit, New Vision Civic Wellness. Owner, Ellen Harris, Madeline's cousin. Photo 3, surveillance still of Deacon Ellis entering the parish basement, following Olivia, time-stamped 2 weeks before her death. Photo 4, a blurred image of Olivia's face, tear-streaked, glancing behind her. The church hallway, same day. Photo 5, a consent form. Mayor Harold Harris's signature authorizing emergency relocation of an at-risk youth. The recipient agency doesn't exist. Photo 6, a handwritten letter from Olivia. Page 1, lines crossed out, fear in her handwriting. Photo 7, the same letter, page 6. Final sentence, tell Father Rourke, he's the only one who didn't lie to me. Photo 8, a group photo of the church council. Olivia in the back, everyone else smiling. She isn't. The USB drive contained the full footage. 3 clips, 2 from the hallway, 1 from a side chapel. No audio, but the expressions were enough. At 9:37 a.m., Madeline Harris canceled 2 appointments. By 10:12, she left City Hall, alone. By noon, I was already at the overlook on Laurel Hill watching the traffic. It took her 32 minutes to drive to the old church lot. She didn't see me, didn't look around. She just parked, hands on the wheel, still. At 12:08 p.m., the local paper's website published a single-line bulletin. Breaking internal investigation underway into St. Emilian's financial activity and diocesan response procedures following recent clergy dismissal. No names, no photos, but the seed was planted. At 3:14 p.m., my burner phone vibrated. Blocked number. No message, just a photo. The envelope. Burned. Ashes still hot. I didn't respond, because I wasn't waiting for a reaction. I was waiting for the sound of structure cracking under its own weight. By Friday, it started. The bishop issued a vague press release citing a regrettable miscommunication in disciplinary measures, public relations language, soft lies. But someone on the inside leaked the footage, not the worst one, not the chapel, just the hallway clip. 1 image, enough. Saturday morning, Olivia's mother posted a single comment under the church's live stream archive. I told you she said something, and you said she was confused. How do you sleep, Bishop? That afternoon, someone uploaded the choir room registry, attendance logs. Deacon Ellis signed in at times he had no scheduled duties. Olivia's name appeared 12 times beside his. The dates matched her therapy entries. The mayor's office went dark. No press releases, no scheduled appearances, no Sunday mass attendance. That was the tell. The envelope didn't destroy Madeline Harris. It invited her to do it herself. At 7:43 p.m. that night, a local news anchor received an anonymous tip. The same footage, same ledger scan, a 10-second clip of the mayor's voice from a confession 3 years earlier. He said, "We keep it quiet. That's how this town works. God forgives. People just forget." It aired at 10 p.m., unedited. I watched it from the butcher's apartment. Mason didn't ask questions. He just handed me a beer. That night, Olivia's face was everywhere, but no one said my name. They didn't have to. She thought the photos were revenge. They were just the warning shot. The reckoning hadn't even started. They expected a scandal, a headline, a slap on the wrist, and a press conference. They didn't expect a landslide. By Monday morning, the diocese called for a full audit. Voluntary, they said. But the Vatican doesn't do voluntary when footage of a dead teenager's final days circulates online. Not when that footage links to donations, and those donations lead to property. And that property is owned by the bishop's niece. The choir director resigned. No statement, no farewell, just silence. The same day, his LinkedIn disappeared. So did he. Deacon Ellis wasn't so lucky. He was arrested 2 towns over, trying to withdraw $8,200 in cash from a joint account he shared with a woman listed in one of Olivia's notes. The arrest report listed interference with a minor under supervision. I read it twice, then deleted the tab. Mayor Harold Harris held a press conference Wednesday morning. His face was red, his eyes swollen, his tie crooked. He didn't mention the footage, didn't mention the funds, didn't mention his wife. He just said, "In light of recent events and out of respect for our community's need for healing, I will not be seeking re-election." Translation: the body hasn't even been buried yet, but I've seen the vultures circling. He didn't take questions. He didn't even make it to the car before someone threw a Bible at him. That same night, Madeline's name trended statewide. The envelope hadn't just ruptured her reputation, it severed her alliances. The wellness center development was suspended. The city council tabled every motion with her name on it. Half the nonprofit boards she chaired issued statements distancing themselves. By Friday, she withdrew from every position she held. No resignation letter, no quote, just gone. Bishop Tolland released a letter on Sunday. "In an effort to encourage transparency, I will be stepping aside during the formal inquiry. This is not an admission of guilt, but an act of spiritual humility. They called it a sabbatical. I called it surrender." The parish attendance dropped by 87%. Choir canceled. Donations frozen. The next 2 services were streamed online. Nobody watched. The diocese shuttered St. Emilian's within 2 weeks. Temporarily, they claimed. Pending resolution, the locks were changed. The bells silenced. The sign was removed on a rainy Tuesday around 11 a.m. They didn't tell anyone, but I watched it happen from the hill across the street. Inside, they boxed up the chalices, the vestments, the linens. They left the statue of St. Emilian behind. It was too heavy to move, or maybe they just didn't want to touch it. Olivia's mother sued the diocese, filed under wrongful death. The lawsuit named 5 individuals. Only one was still in town. She didn't ask for money. She asked for records. I knew she'd find them. I'd left a copy in her mailbox. No note, just the file. A week later, I got a letter. No return address, elegant cursive. Inside, a single sentence. "Was this always your plan?" No signature, but the perfume said enough. I didn't write back, because it wasn't. I didn't do any of this for revenge. I did it because they buried a girl in a white dress, in a coffin her mother couldn't afford, and smiled like it didn't stain them. I did it because they fired me mid-funeral, because she trusted me with the truth, because they called it misconduct, because no one else would. The town went back to normal, in the way that a battlefield looks normal when the smoke clears but the bones are still underfoot. Everyone pretends not to smell it. St. Emilian's Facebook page still exists. The last post is a photo of Olivia with her choir group. She's smiling. They're not. The comments are closed. They thought closing the church would bury it all, but God sees what men hide. And so do I. I returned to the church the night before demolition, not to pray, not to forgive, just to see if the door still opened. It did. The key hadn't changed. Everything else had. The pews were gone. So were the books. The stained glass windows were boxed in plywood, and someone had taken the crucifix off the wall behind the altar. The nails were still in the plaster. Dust hung in the air like memory. I didn't cough. The floor creaked the same. My footsteps knew where to pause. I walked to the altar and placed one item on the slab, a candle. Unlit, no message, no note, just wax, and the wick, and the silence between them. I stood there for 12 minutes. Then I left. I walked the old town one last time, past the butcher shop, past Olivia's school, past the corner where she once handed me a thank you card after I gave a homily on hope. I didn't keep the card, but I remembered the words. You talk like people haven't given up. I like that. I stopped by her grave. The earth was still new. The flowers were plastic. I didn't bring anything, just stood and said the only prayer that ever mattered, I'm sorry. On my way back to the edge of town, I saw the bishop, not in robes, not at the cathedral. He was in a cafe, alone, no collar. He didn't see me, but he looked older. Good. At the bus stop, I opened the envelope that arrived 3 days ago, the one with no stamp. Inside was a check, $50,000. Memo line. Restitution. No name. Just an address to a clinic in another city for at-risk youth. I endorsed it, sealed it, and dropped it in the return box beside the bus bench. Then I sat down and waited for the 9:45 westbound. The bus was late. I didn't mind. The world doesn't stop burning when the truth comes out. It just learns how to carry the smell. I left the collar behind. I left the files, the names, the passwords. I didn't need them anymore. They'd already served their sermon. They said I misused funds. They were right. I misused my faith, my position, my patience, but not my purpose. That stayed the same. 2 years later, different city. No titles, no church, just me. A room above a bar, a pot of coffee on the stove, and a stack of letters from mothers, daughters, brothers, people who weren't buried with silence, because someone opened the envelope when no one else would. I wasn't a priest anymore, but I finally told the truth, and this time, they couldn't fire me for it. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.